Hey everyone, time for another Q&A video. I'd like to start this one revisiting the topic from the previous Q&A, and that's about how I practice, and then we'll see how we go after that, if I can fit any more questions in after that. So after I made the last Q&A video, I'd uploaded it and I kind of realised that there are a few important things that I forgot to mention about my practice. And there's also loads of other details and things that I haven't talked about yet. I mean, in terms of like the subject of practice, I could probably write a book on all the things I've tried and all the things that worked and how how my practice has changed over time. But there are a couple of things that are kind of important to me in how I practice. So I will talk about that now. And I've also had a couple of questions about the last video as well, so I'll try and cover that in this video as well. Right, so we'll start with one of the questions that I had, and I'll use that as a kind of springboard into the other kind of notes that I've made that I'd like to talk about. So the question is, regarding prioritizing fun, do you still have fun working on technical challenges, or do you feel past that? I'm working on technique still. It's easy to get bogged down, but I'm managing. So the first thing I should say is I've never really enjoyed working on technique, and I basically do the bare minimum, just enough to be able to play the way I want to play, and no more than that really. When I think about what I like to focus on as a player, like in the practice room and stuff, and what thoughts I want in my head, I want to concentrate on the universal elements of music: melody, harmony, rhythm, dynamics, composition, you know, phrasing, structure, all this tone, all this kind of stuff, right? These things are universal across all instruments in music. Guitar technique is guitar only. It's just for the guitar, right? But the guitar is a musical instrument, and so I try and focus on the things that are universal to all instruments. Now the technique is something you need. I kind of think of it as like cardio. Now I've always played football my whole life, and I still play it from time to time now. And with football, it doesn't matter how good a player you are, it doesn't matter how good your kind of vision is or your ball control is or anything like that. If you don't have good cardio, you're not going to play well. You need it. And so I kind of see guitar technique as a bit like that. You know, it's just something you have to keep up. And so I do the bare minimum basically. I kind of get my technique to the point where I can play how I want to play, and I don't focus on it any more than I have to. And so one thing with that question is, at the end of the question it says, I'm working on technique still. It's easy to get bogged down, but I'm managing. So I would say don't focus on technique as a single thing. I would personally incorporate it into everything else you are doing. That's how I've always kind of worked on my technique. I've never really been one for doing exercises and stuff like that. I've always used music as technical exercises, so because you learn so much more. You don't just improve your technique, you improve your sense of rhythm, your sense of timing, your ear, everything. So if I want to improve you know, certain elements of my technique, I will learn a piece of music that incorporates that, and I'll just play the piece of music rather than playing an exercise. Or I might write something that's musical rather than a mechanical exercise, but includes the techniques that I want to improve, you know. So I might write some lines or some phrases or a little study, but I will always make sure it's musical first, and then the technique is just a kind of byproduct of concentrating on music. So that's how I kind of do that. And this ties into one of the topics I'd like to mention, and that is creating goals, putting yourself under pressure, and long-term versus short-term enjoyment with your guitar. So in my previous video, I talked about how enjoyment is my number one priority when it comes to playing guitar. And that is true. So if I take all my kind of list of priorities here, the things that I want to work on, enjoyment is way up here. And I use that as my kind of test and gauge of whether what I'm doing is right. I use whether I enjoy it as a way of deciding whether I should spend my time doing something. But there are a couple of different ways you can incorporate this into your playing time, your practice time, and your progress. And an important thing to think about is long-term versus short-term enjoyment. Now, I don't really enjoy working on technique, but what I enjoy even less is being on a gig and not being able to play the way I want. So in order to have a good gig and enjoy myself playing or on a gig or recording or whatever, I need to have my technique on point. So that is worth the kind of effort of the kind of short-term kind of focusing on technique for just enough to get me to the gig where I'm going to enjoy myself. And it's the same thing for a lot of things in life. Focusing on your long-term happiness sometimes means you have to do things in the short term that perhaps you're not so keen on, But if you only look at the short-term happiness always, that can often lead you down a bad path. For example, we might like to eat chocolate, but if you eat a massive bar of chocolate in one sitting, you're probably going to make yourself feel sick, and then if you do that day after day after day, you'll probably gain weight, and those things might make you unhappy. So we kind of limit the amount you eat each time in order to enjoy the chocolate but also have long-term happiness. And it's the same with keeping yourself fit, perhaps to play a sport or something like that, or even just to keep yourself fit just to stay happy. I run quite a bit. I don't particularly enjoy running. It's uncomfortable and painful at times, especially when you're running up a hill. But for that kind of half an hour of aggro, there's 23 and a half hours of the day that are improved because of it. So focusing on your long-term happiness and your long-term enjoyment is kind of really important to me. So that brings me to my next kind of bullet point that I've got here, and that is to so that brings me to my next bullet point that I've got here, and that is creating goals and putting yourself under pressure. So I think it's really important to put yourself in positions that force you to kind of up your game, and that can be doing gigs, that can be recording videos, going in the studio to record tunes for an album, going to jam sessions. But being able to put yourself in those positions where you really do have to kind of perform, I guess, that's really good for you, and that's so important to me to do that. Now I do that a lot we do a lot of gigging, and I do a lot of these videos. I mentioned in my previous video that I do a lot of these kind of short form videos that I do. They're actually really good for my playing because they kind of force me to focus my attention onto something, and that's where, like, creating small goals and long-term goals as well, these kind of they force you to really pay attention to the details. Now we can all spend hours jamming along to backing tracks in our at home and things, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But when the red light's on, when you're on stage and there's an audience looking at you, that kind of really does force you to pay attention to all the little details much more than it does when you're just at home playing for your own enjoyment. So I recommend, creating small goals, and putting yourself under pressure as a way to, as a way to make progress. I think that's really important. And one other thing that I should mention on that is, when I say put yourself under pressure, I don't mean do things that you won't enjoy. I mean do things that will give you a sense of achievement and things that you will get something back from. So don't play with musicians you don't enjoy playing with. Don't play music you don't enjoy playing. Obviously sometimes as professional musicians we might get booked to play music that we're not so keen on. That's kind of part of making a living, but I'm talking more about as our kind of own personal development as musicians. Don't spend time on things that you won't enjoy or get something back from. So find musicians you enjoy playing with, play music you enjoy playing, create small goals and environments that force you to kind of up your game, and that's so important to me, and I can't recommend it enough. Right. So the next thing that I forgot to mention in that first video is this. These are my practice notes, my practice diaries. And this is actually a box that I've had since I was a little kid. That's my kind of 7-year-old writing there. It says Beatle box. When I was a kid I was obsessed with the Beatles. I mean, I still am. One of my favourite bands. But in this box I collected all kind of Beatles memorabilia and stuff, which was basically all stuff that belonged to my dad, but it was like books and CDs and tapes and whatnot, magazine cuttings. Anyway, I'm using this box at the moment as to store all of my practice notes. And a really important thing that I've been doing this most of my guitar playing life is keeping notes and making notes of the things that I'm working on. And these here go back probably, some of these will go back like 20 odd years. So I actually used to keep notes when I was a little kid as well, but I don't have any of those original notes, which is a shame. But when I was, in primary school, I used to have a list of all the things that I'd learnt, every song that I'd learnt, and each day I would play through the list, and as I learnt new things they'd go onto the bottom of the list, and this list ended up getting longer and longer and longer until I realised eventually that this is kind of unsustainable because the list is just going to be endless, and so I had to kind of rethink the way I was doing it. But I've always kind of been, I guess, kind of organised, and I've always tried to be organised, at least in the way I do things. Now, there isn't a particular formula to any of this. It's kind of random. I call it chaos theory, because in here all of these folders are full of bits of paper that are notes of things that I've been working on over the years. And whenever I practice, I have a piece of paper in front of me, or a notepad or something like that, and whatever I'm working on, I write it down. Now, a lot of the time that is just literally like the name of the tune I'm working on, or if it's a line, it might be, it might say, for example, I'll show you. This is my current folder, and recently I've been transcribing Paul Desmond, who's probably my favourite jazz soloist of all time. Maybe he's definitely up there in my kind of top 3. And I've been transcribing a few of his ideas and just trying to learn from his playing. And so here I've got Paul Desmond, phrase from out of nowhere, 2 minutes 30. And then it just says it's a 251. And so that's just to jog my memory. So the next day when I come into the practice room, I can look back and go, oh yeah, that's what I did. That's what I was working on yesterday, because I kind of got fed up. You know, when you practice for a long period of time, then the next day you come back to your practice room and you think, what the hell did I even do? But at the time it felt so good, like you were making a lot of progress. So I just write things down like that. And again, Paul Desmond phrase out of nowhere, 2 minutes 19. So there's another phrase there, which I actually can't remember which one that was, but I'd have to go back to it. But the main thing is it's jogging my memory. It's reminding me. I also put in here things that I want to work on, you know, that I not necessarily have worked on yet, but, you know, like tunes that I want to learn and things like that. And there's all kinds of stuff in here. You know, I just jot things down, things I've been working on, standards I've been working on, versions that I've been listening to. And it's I call it chaos theory because it's very chaotic, because all these bits of paper are different sizes. They're all from different books, notepads that I've torn out. And another thing is they're not in chronological order either. And I use these folders. The reason I use these folders is because I can go back, I can grab a random folder and I can see something and there's old set lists in here as well. But I can go back and just go, oh yeah, I remember I was working on that, you know, 10 years ago. And I can take it out and I can put it in my new folder, my current folder, and I can continue working on it. It doesn't have to be, it's not like a diary in chronological order. I've tried it in chronological order, but I found it was just annoying because sometimes I wanted to kind of rip that page out and work more on it and bring it up to the, you know, bring it to my kind of current practice sessions. So it is really chaotic. Sometimes I put the date on it, most of the time I don't. But sometimes I might write a little bit of tab out, something like that, you know, just to remind myself of a line if it's simple, you know, some kind of basic 251 lick or something like that. I've tried so many things over the years that have kind of come and gone in my playing, but the one thing that has always kind of stayed with me for many years is keeping notes. I've also got a couple of files on my computer with like digital notes as well, that aren't written down. In the past, I've amassed a lot of stuff on my computer, and then I printed it out and stuck them in my folders. But at the moment, I'm just keeping it in my kind of Google Drive. But yeah, this is a really important part of what I do, and it means I can keep track of the things I'm working on, and so I recommend doing that. You don't have to be as kind of full on as this, but I do recommend, you know, keeping some kind of note. Another way I keep notes is with audio files. I record on my phone. I have you know, a little voice recorder, and I've done that in the past. When I was a kid, I used to have one of those dictaphones with the tiny little tapes. I've still got it somewhere, and my old notes and ideas. And if I come up with an idea, a riff or a song or an idea or a lick or something like that, if it can't be written down, then I'll record it. And what I'll then do is I'll often write in my notes the name of the file and say, you know, like, you know, the date and the name of the file the name I've given to that file, and I'll reference it in my notes. So then I can flick through my notes and go, you know, it might say, you know, idea for a blues rock tune, or a riff or something, and then the name of the file, and then I can go and find that file, whether it's in my phone or on my computer or whatever. I also use Pro Tools, the recording software, on my computer, which is like a digital audio workstation. You can use anything really. I've been using Pro Tools for years, and again, I've got these Pro Tools sessions that are full of ideas and things that I've been working on, and very often those are referenced in my notes so that I can go back and go, oh yeah, ideas that I've been working on minor swing. See Pro Tools session file, and then I can go back and revisit things. And so I think I mentioned it in the last video. For me, it's being able to the process of learning something, forgetting it and coming back to it and recalling it. That's really good for me. Keep revisiting things. So it's okay for things to go out of your mind, but as long as you've got a way of going back to them in the future, and then the more you revisit an idea, the more it reinforces in your mind. So and a great way of doing that and keeping track of all that is with some kind of note-taking system. So yeah, that's a big part of how I work. Right, so I'm not sure how long this video is going to come in at. They're usually longer than I planned, but there are a couple of other things on my list that I would like to mention. And one of those is using a timer. Now, over the years, I've used a timer in practice, and then I've gone long periods without using a timer, and then I'll come back and use a timer, and then I won't use it again for a period. I have been using it a little bit recently, actually. So it's not something that's essential to my practice, not like with the note keeping, but it is something that has helped me, and it is something I use from time to time. And that's, I use a kind of countdown timer. You can have an app on your phone and put it on your watch, or or just a kitchen timer. Anything really. There's this thing called the Pomodoro technique, which is the same kind of idea. It's this idea where if you want to work on things for a long period, you break it down into 25 minutes of work, 5 minutes of rest, 25 minutes of work, 5 minutes of rest, etc. And it's just a way of helping you focus. I've found it can be really useful if I want to work on one thing and not get distracted. I'll sometimes go, right, okay, timer 15 minutes, and I'll just repeat that thing for 15 minutes. That can be things that are a little more kind of less interesting to work on, mechanical things, maybe something that I'm working on from a technique point of view in order to prepare for a gig, or it might just be literally repeating an idea over and over and over in order to just gain muscle memory and improve my execution of an idea. That might be taking a line and going up in semitones and back down in semitones and back up of 15 minutes. It can be anything really, but using a timer to kind of focus you, so when that clock is ticking down, you are focused, and then when the timer goes off, you can put your guitar down, make a cup of tea, and then come back and do it again. And so there's loads of ways of doing that. You can do short periods of 5-minute periods. You can do longer periods, half an hour at a time, 15 minutes off, half an hour. I'm very rarely sticking to it rigorously. But it is just a good way, and I've always got one on my desk. Well, usually anyway. This is actually just a kitchen timer, but you can use your phone or an app on your computer. And occasionally I'm practicing and I feel like that would help me, I'll use it. And so it's a good thing to do. Warming up is a good thing to do as well. Sometimes if I'm warming up at a certain tempo, I'll do 10 minutes of that tempo and then 10 minutes of a slightly faster tempo, and these kind of ways, these are ways of structuring your time in order to get the best out of that time. And I find it does help prevent distraction, which is, our world is full of distractions with kind of the internet and all that. So being able to just focus on one thing for a period of time, that's really good. So yeah, using a timer, that's something I recommend as well. Right, so there are just two more things on my kind of list to mention here, and then I've got a question that I'd like to answer as well. So the first thing is, my playing is very cyclic. I allow my kind of technique to slip away in order to focus on other things. I think it's a good way of growing as a musician. Certainly it's been good for me. When you see me on a gig, or you might see a video of me playing on a gig, you might see like the last tune of the gig where everything's really fast and everything looks technical and all that kind of stuff. I don't play like that all year round. I can't play like that every day of the year. That is something I build up to in order for the gig or the tour or the recording session or whatever, or the video. The rest of the time, I'm happy for my technique and my that side of things, the mechanical side of things. I'm happy for that to slide and revert to kind of the ticking over level, where it's just ticks along. And I do that in order to focus on other things. Focus on harmony, melody, other elements, maybe playing different types of music, maybe work on some kind of slide guitar thing, which I'm terrible at, but something I want to improve in my playing, or perhaps playing, some blues that isn't kind of so technique orientated. And then, or learn some songs that don't involve technique. And then when I've got gigs on the horizon, I'll start building back up to the kind of level of technique that I need in order to do those gigs. So yeah, it's okay to have cycles, up and down, round and round. This is a good way of making progress, and it's also a great way of allowing yourself to grow in other areas and broaden your knowledge and your skill set. Now, I love playing up-tempo gypsy jazz stuff. It's exciting, it's very creative, it's a lot of fun to do, and on gigs, people love seeing it. It's part of that kind of genre of guitar playing. But I don't necessarily want to do it every day of the year. There are periods where I want to work on, I want to study, say, Peter Green's playing, for example, when he's playing at slower tempos. And that style of guitar playing doesn't involve these kind of gypsy jazz right-hand chops, okay? And so if I want to focus on that, I don't want to have to, in the back of my mind, be worried that my technique is sliding and I'm losing my ability to play at high tempos. I don't want that to be on my mind when I'm focusing on something else. And so I'm happy to just kind of forget about it and just let it slide and just know that I can come back to it when I want to do that. And it just takes a bit of work to build back up. So in that respect, yeah, my playing is quite cyclic. It does mean I have to plan ahead a little bit because I'm not always gig ready for a gypsy jazz gig, for example. And the same goes with blues. I mean, there is kind of more technique, more kind of tricky picking technique involved with the gypsy jazz stuff. But even with the blues stuff, if I spend a lot of time playing gypsy jazz stuff, my left hand isn't as used to doing all the bends and things that you play within the blues guitar style. So again, I'll work on this thing for a period, and then I'll work on this thing for a period. And for me, it usually ties in with our gig schedule. And we tend to gig in kind of tours or groups of gigs. So we'll have like a month and a half of the Peter Green project. We'll do a month of gypsy jazz trio, and then we might go back to a different thing, some blues rock gigs. And my playing will usually follow the kind of the schedule that we've laid out. And usually between tours, if they're two different styles of music, we'll have like maybe 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks, where I'm kind of switching my playing over And so this kind of cycle goes on and on. But I do really think it's good. But it does mean, like, you know, some days of the year, if someone says to me, there's a gypsy jazz gig tonight, can you come and play it? Well, I mean, I could do the gig, but I'm not going to be at my best, okay? In order for me to be at my best, I need to be able to prepare for that. And prep time is something I kind of schedule into the diary in order to in order to do the gigs and the recordings and whatnot and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, so that's another thing that I take into consideration with my practice. Right, so there's one more thing on my list that I want to mention, and in some ways this is the most important thing in my life as a musician, and that is that I listen to a lot of music. It's so important to me. It's like oxygen. I need it. And it's important for us to remember that the guitar and all these things we think about when we're playing the guitar, you know, the techniques and the theory and all this kind of stuff, all of that is secondary to our love of music itself. If we don't have that love for music, then all of this stuff is pointless. There's no point doing it. And that's important to me. Music has got me through so many bad times and has also given me so many good times. And it's something I kind of need all the time in my life. If I don't listen to music regularly, I notice I can become quite unhappy, and as soon as I start listening to music again, it can fix that, and that's really important. Not only is listening to lots of music good for you in general, it's also very good from a playing point of view as well, because you're constantly reminding yourself of the things you like. You're also reminding yourself of the things you don't like when you hear something you're not so keen on, which is also very good for you, because that reminds you of why you like the things you do like. You can learn a lot from just listening to music. You can pick up on a lot of details within the recordings, things that you might not otherwise notice. You can also find things that you want to learn. So I'm often making notes when I'm listening to music. I might hear something that I like, you know, a little lick or a phrase or a tune or something like that, and I'm like, I think, well, I'd really like to learn that, so I might write it down, and next time I'm in the practice room, I've got something to work on. And so that's really important as well. So there's so many elements of just listen to music, and I know this is like an obvious thing to say, you know, we all listen to music, but for me it's really important to really get deep into the music. Yeah, you can have it on in the background as well, but just really burying your head in music from time to time is really good, and listen to all the details. It's so important to me, and it's something I'm really conscious of, and yeah, a big part of my life as a musician. Right, so on that note, I think we'll wrap it up there. I did actually have a couple of other questions that I wanted to include in this video, but I think it's already going to be quite long. So I'm going to have to edit this one together, and I'll come to the other questions on a later video. So yeah, hopefully some of this has been of interest, and thanks for sticking around, and yeah, see you next time.